April 22, 2016. The sun rose over Pike County, Ohio, casting a golden glow over the quiet countryside. The rolling hills stretched for miles, untouched, peaceful. Families prepared for the day ahead, morning coffee brewed in small kitchens, children stirred awake in their beds, and the town moved at its usual, steady pace. But out on Union Hill Road, silence clung to the air like a thick fog. No sounds of footsteps, no voices, just stillness. Then police sirens cut through the morning calm. Flashing blue and red lights reflected off gravel roads and farmhouse windows. Officers moved quickly, their boots crunching against the dirt. The radio chatter was urgent, their faces grim. Inside 4 separate homes, a brutal truth awaited. The bodies of 8 family members lay motionless, their lives stolen in the dead of night. Parents, siblings, sons, daughters, some shot as they slept. Others executed in cold blood. Infants left alive beside their murdered mothers. A massacre. A crime so violent, so unthinkable, it would send shockwaves through the nation. Who could have done this? And why? The search for answers would stretch on for years, uncovering secrets buried deep within the heart of this small town. But on that morning, as investigators stepped into those homes, one thing was clear. Whoever did this, they wanted the Rhoden family erased. Pike County, Ohio, a place where life moves at a slow and steady pace. Rolling fields stretch for miles, dotted with farmhouses, dirt roads, and rusted fences. The community is small, fewer than 30,000 people, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Neighbors wave as they pass by, doors are left unlocked, and generations of families stay rooted in the land they've known their entire lives. Among them was the Rhoden family, a name well known throughout the area. They were hardworking, resilient, and deeply connected. They raised livestock, ran auto repair businesses, and stuck together through tough times. Like many in rural Ohio, they made their living through manual labor, working long days to provide for their children. Christopher Rhoden Sr., 40, was the head of the family. A father, a brother, a son. He had built a life on Union Hill Road, living alongside his relatives in a tight-knit cluster of homes. His ex-wife, Dana Rhoden, 37, was the mother of their children. Despite their divorce, they remained close, raising their kids together. Their eldest, 20-year-old Clarence Frankie Rhoden, had started a family of his own. He lived with his fiancée, Hannah Gilly, 20, and their 6-month-old son. Christopher's younger son, 16-year-old Christopher Rhoden Jr., still had his whole life ahead of him. So did 19-year-old Hannah Mae Rhoden, a young mother devoted to her children. Alongside them was Kenneth Rhoden, Christopher's brother, and their cousin, Gary Rhoden, 38. Each of them was a piece of the family's foundation. Each of them had a future. But in the early hours of April 22, 2016, that future was stolen. One by one, they were executed. Their homes, once filled with life, now crime scenes marked by bloodstains and bullet casings. The tight-knit family that had stood together for decades was gone. The news sent a shockwave through Pike County. Families locked their doors. Rumors spread like wildfire. Who could kill an entire family in one night? And why? As authorities searched for answers, the small town of Piketon braced itself for a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. April 21, 2016. It was a Thursday night in Pike County, Ohio. The Rhoden family had no reason to suspect that anything was out of the ordinary. The homes along Union Hill Road were quiet, tucked away from the main highway, surrounded by dense trees and long stretches of open fields. This was their land, their safe haven. Inside those homes, life carried on as usual. Christopher Rhoden Sr. spent time with his family. His ex-wife, Dana, was just a short drive away, caring for their children. Frankie Rhoden and his fiancée, Hannah Gilly, were at home with their baby boy, settling in for the night. Hannah Mae Rhoden, 19 years old and a devoted mother, likely checked in on her newborn daughter before heading to bed. As darkness fell, the town of Piketon grew still. Families locked their doors, turned off their lights, and drifted into sleep. But sometime in the early morning hours of April 22nd, death came creeping down Union Hill Road. The killers knew their targets. They knew the layout of the homes. They moved silently, striking in the dead of night, one house after another. Inside the first home, Christopher Rhoden Sr. was shot multiple times. The shots were deliberate, aimed to kill. His cousin, Gary Rhoden, was murdered beside him. At the second house, Dana Rhoden was found dead, bullets tearing through her body. She never had the chance to fight back. At Frankie Rhoden's home, the killers took the same ruthless approach. Frankie and Hannah Gilley were shot execution style, their lifeless bodies lying close together. Their 6-month-old son was found unharmed, nestled between them, untouched by the horror around him. At the final home, Hannah Mae Rhoden was murdered in her bed. Her newborn daughter, only days old, was left alive, sleeping beside her mother's lifeless body. Her 16-year-old brother, Christopher Rhoden Jr., was also shot and killed, his life ending before it had truly begun. Kenneth Rhoden, Christopher Sr.'s brother, was found dead in a separate location, murdered just like the rest of his family. The crime scenes told a chilling story. This was calculated, precise. The killers had used suppressors on their weapons, ensuring that no one outside the homes would hear the gunfire. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, no broken locks. The family had either known their killers or had been caught so completely off guard that they never had a chance to resist. The first call to 911 came at 7:49 a.m. when a terrified woman dialed in. It was Bobby Jo Manley, a relative of the Rhodens, who had come to check on them that morning. Her voice trembled as she told the dispatcher what she had seen: 2 bodies, blood everywhere. "I think they're both dead," she said, her voice laced with panic. More calls followed as additional bodies were discovered. Soon, law enforcement arrived, and within hours, the small stretch of Union Hill Road became the center of one of the most shocking crime scenes in Ohio's history. The initial reactions. Sheriff Charles Reeder, one of the first officials on the scene, could barely contain his emotions as he spoke to reporters. This was a pre-planned, execution-style massacre. The perpetrators of this crime are monsters. As the bodies were carried away in coroner's vans, the reality of what had happened sank in. A family, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, had been wiped out in a single night. Neighbors were afraid to step outside. The people of Piketon whispered theories among themselves. Was this drug-related? A personal vendetta? A crime of passion? Or something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? One thing was clear: whoever had done this had left no room for mistakes. And they weren't finished yet. By the afternoon of April 22, 2016, law enforcement had taken full control of Union Hill Road. The once quiet rural area was now flooded with officers, crime scene investigators, and media vans broadcasting the shocking news across the country. Yellow police tape stretched across multiple properties, marking the 4 crime scenes where 8 members of the Rhoden family had been murdered in cold blood. Sheriff Charles Reeder and Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine stood before the cameras at a hastily arranged press conference, their faces solemn. The words they spoke sent chills through the crowd. This was a pre-planned execution of 8 individuals, DeWine stated. Whoever did this, they were calculating, methodical, and they will be found. The community was in disbelief. This wasn't just a crime, it was a massacre. And for law enforcement, the questions were piling up. Who would want to kill an entire family? Why had some victims been shot multiple times while others were killed in their sleep? Why were the young children spared? And most chilling of all, was the killer still in Pike County? A crime with no witnesses from the beginning, investigators faced an uphill battle. There were no apparent witnesses, no frantic 911 calls during the night, no security cameras capturing suspicious movements. The killers had executed their plan with terrifying precision. The home showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the family may have known their attackers or had been caught completely off guard. The use of suppressors on the murder weapons meant that gunshots were muffled, allowing the killers to move between the 4 locations without drawing attention. The sheer scale of the crime presented another challenge. For different homes, 8 victims. That meant multiple crime scenes, each requiring extensive forensic analysis. It was a logistical nightmare for investigators. Early theories began to emerge with little physical evidence available in the first few days. Law enforcement turned to the victims' backgrounds, searching for possible motives. Theories began circulating, some fueled by investigative findings, others by community speculation. One of the first discoveries at the crime scene sent the investigation in an unexpected direction. Deep in the woods, near one of the Rhoden family properties, investigators uncovered something unusual: an illegal marijuana grow operation. Large quantities of cannabis plants, carefully cultivated, hidden from public view. It was a shocking revelation. The Rhoden family was well known in Pike County, but this discovery suggested they might have been involved in something beyond their quiet rural lifestyle. Law enforcement was forced to ask difficult questions. Could this have been a cartel hit? Was this a territorial dispute over drugs? Had the Rhodens gotten involved with the wrong people? Attorney General Mike DeWine acknowledged the marijuana grow operation in a press conference, stating that it could not be ignored as a potential factor in the murders. But the theory had problems. While organized crime groups were known for executing people over drug disputes, they rarely left young children alive. This crime had been ruthless but strangely selective. Then, another piece of evidence emerged. Cockfighting equipment was found on the Rhoden properties. This raised more questions. Was the family involved in underground gambling? Could a fight have gone wrong, leading to a deadly act of revenge? The town of Piketon was rife with speculation. Some believed the murders had been carried out by outsiders, professionals sent to eliminate the family. Others were convinced it was personal, that someone within their circle had turned against them. Paranoia grips the town as the days stretched into weeks with no arrests. Fear spread like wildfire. Families started locking their doors at night, something they had never done before. Residents armed themselves, convinced that whoever had killed the Rhodens might strike again. Even seasoned law enforcement officers admitted that this case was unlike anything they had ever seen. Rumors circulated about hitmen, feuds, and betrayals. Some residents whispered that the Rhodens had been targeted for something they knew, something bigger than drugs or gambling. Then, a chilling detail surfaced. The killers had spent time at the crime scenes after the murders, carefully covering their tracks. Phone records showed that one of the victims' phones had been used after their death, suggesting that the perpetrators were deliberately trying to manipulate information. The town wanted answers. Law enforcement was desperate for a breakthrough. But months passed, and still, the case remained unsolved. Then, in late 2016, investigators got their first real lead. Someone had been watching the Rhodens closely before the murders. Surveillance was conducted on their homes in the days leading up to April 22nd. Who had been watching them? And what were they looking for? The deeper authorities dug, the more unsettling the truth became. The killers weren't strangers. They weren't hired assassins from a drug cartel. They were much closer than anyone had imagined. As months turned into years with no arrests, the Rhoden family massacre seemed to be an unsolvable crime. Investigators followed countless leads, but nothing pointed to a definitive suspect until they started looking closer at those who had the most to lose. The Wagner family in the small town of Piketon. The Wagner family had been well known, much like the Rhodens. At the center of this connection was Edward Jake Wagner, a 24-year-old who had once been in a relationship with one of the victims, Hannah Mae Rhoden. Together, they had a daughter, Sophia Wagner. Hannah and Jake had dated for years, and for a time, their relationship seemed stable. But by 2015, things had changed. Hannah had moved on, and the two were in an ongoing custody battle over their young daughter. Jake Wagner, along with his parents, George Billy Wagner III and Angela Wagner, and his older brother, George Wagner IV, had been persistent about one thing. They wanted Sophia to be raised by the Wagners, not the Rhodens. It was a custody dispute that had grown bitter over time, but on the surface, it seemed no different from other parental disagreements. That was until authorities found a chilling piece of evidence, a Facebook message that Hannah had sent just months before she was murdered. Hannah Rhoden's final words Hannah had written to a friend: "They will have to kill me first before they get custody of Sophia." Her words would later prove haunting. Investigators now had a working theory. The Wagners may have wanted Sophia so badly that they were willing to kill for her. But a motive alone wasn't enough. Law enforcement needed something concrete, something to place the Wagners at the crime scenes. What they would eventually uncover was a web of deception stretching back years. For more than 2 years, investigators painstakingly worked to connect the dots. They reviewed thousands of documents, traced digital footprints, and monitored the Wagner family's movements. What they found was disturbing. In 2017, authorities placed the Wagners under covert surveillance. Their conversations were recorded. Every move they made was watched. And soon, investigators uncovered the first major break in the case. Jake Wagner, along with his mother Angela, had forged custody documents in the months leading up to the murders. These papers, which indicated Jake should have sole custody of Sophia, were prepared before the Rhodens were killed. This suggested premeditation, a key factor in proving a calculated murder plot. Shortly after the murders, the Wagner family did something unusual. They sold their property in Pike County, liquidated many of their belongings, and moved to Alaska. At first, they claimed it was for a fresh start, But authorities saw it differently. They suspected the Wagners were running, not just from their past, but from the truth. The most damning evidence came from physical items recovered during searches of Wagner properties. Investigators discovered that the Wagners had gone to great lengths to prepare for the murders. Homemade gun silencers were found, matching the exact type used in the killings. Tampered security footage was uncovered, showing an attempt to conceal their movements. Bullets and weapons parts matched the casings recovered from the crime scenes. Every new detail painted a picture of a family that had planned a massacre with military precision. On November 13, 2018, after 2.5 years of investigation, law enforcement made their move. Billy Wagner, Angela Wagner, George Wagner IV, and Jake Wagner were all arrested and charged with the murders of the Rhoden family. The charges against them were staggering: 8 counts of aggravated murder, conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, unlawful possession of a dangerous ordinance. It was a takedown that shook Pike County to its core. Jake Wagner's confession facing the death penalty. Jake Wagner eventually pleaded guilty to all charges. In a chilling courtroom admission, he confessed to his role in the massacre, detailing how his family had planned the killings for months. By 2023, all members of the Wagner family had been convicted, with Angela and George Wagner for receiving lengthy prison sentences. But for the surviving members of the Rhoden family, justice could never bring back what had been taken. The case had begun with a custody battle and ended with a night of unimaginable horror. The lengths that one family went to for control had left an entire town scarred forever. The arrest of the Wagner family brought a sense of relief to Pike County, but the fight for justice was far from over. The trials that followed would expose chilling details about the premeditated murders, a family's secret pact, and the betrayal that ultimately led to their downfall. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: handmade silencers, bullets matching those at the crime scenes, custody documents forged before the murders, and disturbing surveillance footage. But the case reached its most pivotal moment when Jake Wagner decided to confess. Faced with the death penalty, Jake agreed to plead guilty in exchange for his life in prison and the possibility of parole after 32 years. His plea deal came with a condition: he had to testify against his own family. In court, Jake described how the murders were planned for months. His mother, Angela Wagner, had researched how to hack Facebook accounts and delete messages. His father, Billy Wagner, and brother, George Wagner IV, had trained for the attack. Jake admitted he pulled the trigger on 5 of the victims, including the mother of his child, Hannah Rhoden. She had refused to sign over custody of their daughter, and for that, she was marked for death. The courtroom was silent as Jake described how they moved from house to house that night, systematically executing the Rhoden family as they slept. After hearing her son's confession, Angela Wagner pleaded guilty as well. She admitted to helping plan the murders, covering up evidence, and assisting in the aftermath. In exchange for cooperating with prosecutors, she received a 30-year sentence. George Wagner IV's trial. A different strategy. Unlike Jake and Angela, George Wagner IV refused to admit guilt. He claimed he wasn't involved in the actual killings. His trial in 2022 lasted weeks, with prosecutors painting him as an active participant in planning the massacre. Despite his denials, the jury found him guilty on all charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The final trial, that of George "Billy" Wagner III, was still pending. As the alleged mastermind behind the plan, he maintained his innocence. Prosecutors were pushing for the death penalty, and the entire county was waiting to see how his case would unfold. For the surviving Rhoden family members, no punishment would ever undo the devastation left behind. Pike County, once a quiet rural community, had become the backdrop of one of the most horrifying crimes in Ohio's history. Even years after the convictions, the pain of the Rhoden family massacre still lingers. Survivors, including the young children who lost their parents that night, have grown up with the weight of a tragedy they barely remember. Sophia Wagner, the daughter at the center of the custody battle, is now being raised by Hannah Rhoden's family. The case had also left deep scars on the community. Some people still question whether others may have been involved. Others struggle to understand how a family could carry out such a coordinated killing spree. As the years pass, memorials remain, serving as a reminder of the innocent lives lost in one of the most shocking family murders in U.S. history. But even as justice has been served, unanswered questions remain. Despite the confessions, convictions, and life sentences, the full story of what happened on April 22, 2016 may never be known. 1. Was there more to the motive? While custody of Sophia was the widely accepted motive, some believe there were other undisclosed reasons behind the killings. Was there a financial or business dispute between the families? Could there have been other individuals involved who were never charged? Did the Wagners have help from people outside the family? 2. Did Billy Wagner order the killings? Jake claimed he pulled the trigger, but was Billy Wagner the true mastermind? If convicted, will Billy reveal new details about the planning or deeper motives behind the murders? 3. Could the murders have been prevented? With Hannah Rhoden's chilling Facebook message warning that she would never give up custody, should authorities have intervened sooner? The Rhoden family had no idea they were being targeted, but looking back, were there warning signs that were missed? 4. What will happen to the surviving Wagners? Jake Wagner will spend at least 32 years in prison before being eligible for parole. George Wagner IV will die behind bars. Angela Wagner will be released in her 70s, but will she ever speak out about the truth of what really happened? As for Billy Wagner, his trial remains a final chapter yet to be written. But one thing is certain, Pike County, Ohio, will never forget the night the Rhoden family was taken from them. The Pike County Massacre stands as one of the most chilling family murders in American history. A family wiped out in the dead of night, betrayed by those they once trusted. The Wagners planned every detail, executing their crime with military precision, yet in the end, they couldn't escape justice. But despite the convictions, the true depths of their motives may never be fully understood. Was this solely about custody, or was there something more? Something buried beneath years of secrecy and deception? As the final chapter of this case is still being written, we are left with haunting questions. What truly drove the Wagners to commit these murders? Did Billy Wagner orchestrate the killings, or was it a collective decision? Were there more people involved who have yet to be named? Even with justice served, the pain remains. The survivors of the Rhoden family continue to grieve. A child, once at the heart of a deadly custody battle, grows up without her mother, never knowing the family she lost. And Pike County, Ohio, still carries the weight of that night, a night that will never be forgotten. What do you think about this case? Do you believe the full truth has been revealed, or are there still secrets buried beneath the surface? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this documentary compelling, subscribe for more deep dive true crime investigations. We bring you detailed, in-depth stories, cases that demand to be told. Hit the like button if you believe justice was served, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next investigation.